Sewing with Conductive Fabric by Disparate Disciplines. Hey everyone! Welcome back to the Honeycrisp Mitten Sew Along. Today is all about sewing with conductive fabric and how to find the grain line on it. But first, you might be wondering, why do I even need conductive fabric to begin with? Well, that's because most smartphones these days have capacitive touch screens. Now, capacitive touch screens can sense when you're touching them via the electrical impulses in your fingers. They do not respond to pressure. That's why if you have a gloved hand, you can't use them. The fabric actually blocks the electricity in your body from flowing down to the screen. So, what makes them conductive in the first place? Well, metal. The fabric that I carry in my shop contains silver, which means it is also antibacterial in addition to being conductive. The metal just lets the electricity flow right on through to the screen. Here are the two fabrics I carry. You'll see one is black with shots of silver, and there's one side looks a bit more silver than the other. The other fabric is a very light gray with one side a little darker gray. Which is great because you can use either side of the fabrics to better match with whatever your main fabric is. But they kind of look just like regular fabric, don't they? Well, that's because they kind of are. The only thing that makes them special is that they're plated with silver. See? Stretches very nicely. Because they're pretty much like regular jersey though, you can sew them just as if they're a regular jersey, which means sew them with a ballpoint needle and using regular thread. You do not need conductive thread. So yeah, that's it. Ballpoint needle, because you don't want to get any tears in your fabric like you would get if you used a regular sharp or universal needle. So, the great thing about the Honeycrisp mitten pattern is, conductive fabric, it can be expensive, but you only need very little bits because it just needs to cover your fingertips. So when you buy fabric in my shop at disparatedisciplines.com/shop, you'll get it like this in these rectangles that are about 8 by 12 inches. Now, these rectangles can actually let you make as many as 4 pairs of mittens, but because they've been cut up into these rectangles, you probably won't have a selvage on your piece. But not to fret, you can still find the grain line really easily. All you need for that is a clear ruler and your pattern pieces. So, but before we get started on that though, you need to know a little bit about knit fabric. Take a look at these diagrams. See how the front of the knit fabric is made up of all these little V's. Those V's are knit stitches, and the columns that you can easily see the V's in are parallel to the grain line. Now, on the back side of the fabric, the wrong side, you've got all these little lines that are called purl bumps, and those run perpendicular to the grain line. What we're going to do is take your pattern piece, sandwich it in between the front of your fabric and your ruler. And you're going to want to leave a little bit of the pattern piece sticking out from the ruler. Now this works well with the gray conductive fabric because you can easily see the knit stitches on the front side of this fabric. So you've got your little sandwich, line up the edge of the ruler to be parallel to one of the columns of V's. That's your grain line. Now scoot your little pattern piece around until the grain line on the pattern piece matches with the edge of the ruler. And there you go, you're on grain. Now, what about the black fabric though? It's kind of hard to see the V's, but it's pretty easy to see all the rows of purl bumps. Again, take your pattern piece, sandwich it in between the fabric and ruler, but this time have it on the wrong side of the fabric. Now you're going to line up the edge of the ruler to be perpendicular to one of those rows of purl bumps. Then you can move your little pattern piece around until the grain line on the pattern piece is parallel to the edge of the ruler. There you go. Now, I've got to be honest with you. If you fudge the grain line a little bit, it's okay. And I've tested this out myself because while I was looking at different kinds of conductive fabric to use, I had these wee little bitty samples to test on. And most of them, they were so small that you couldn't get a pattern piece on there unless the grain was way off. So if you fudge the grain a little bit, it's okay. And actually, if you do that, you might be able to squeeze in a 5th pair of mittens on your cut of fabric instead of just 4. Now, another thing to note about the fabric is that it is pretty thin. It's, lightweight jersey. So because it's lightweight jersey, it's just not going to be as warm as fleece. So you might be wondering, why didn't I just get a thicker fabric? Well, let's take a look at one of the test pairs of mittens I made while I was developing the pattern. Now, see the tips of the fingers? They actually have, all of them, have different kinds of conductive fabric on them. Now, that made it really easy to tell, which one would work best as I was, going about my day with the mittens on. And let's see, this really shiny fabric here on this mitten, it's about almost twice as thick as the jerseys that I've decided to carry in my shop. But I didn't pick it because it is cold. Oh my gosh, it felt like wearing nothing. And then the wind would just brush right through it, and it wasn't good. But on this mitten, you can see I tested, this great conductive fabric, and it was actually a lot warmer than that shiny stuff. I'm telling you this because obviously you don't have to get your conductive fabric from my shop. It's available at a number of other online retailers, but that shiny stuff is really common. So if you do get your fabric elsewhere, just keep that in mind, that the shinier stuff will no heat retention at all, which is not a problem if your hands don't get too cold, because the fabric really does work well with smartphones. It won't keep you warm. So if cold is a problem for you, what you can do, even with the fabrics in my shop, is just double them up. Cut out twice as many pattern pieces as you need, then sew 2 together at a time when you're constructing your mittens, and then you'll have a double layer there, a little bit of extra warmth. Once you've got your mittens sewn though, how do you take care of it? Well, even though you can sew with this fabric as if it were a regular jersey, you do need to coddle it just a little bit when you're taking care of it. Now, this advice is straight from the manufacturer, so I would heed it. You can put it in the washing machine, but just make sure that it's on a gentle or low spin cycle, and you have to use gentle detergent. You cannot, absolutely cannot, use bleach or chlorine because that will damage the silver that is in the fabric. You can put it in the dryer, although the manufacturer says it's really best to air dry it, but if you have to put it in the dryer, then put it on a low spin cycle. Now, I don't foresee many people needing to dry clean their mittens, but if you do, just know that while it probably would be okay, different dry cleaners use different kinds of chemicals when they're, washing your things. So can't guarantee that things will come out all hunky-dory. And as for ironing, you can go ahead and iron, but just make sure it's on a low setting because some of the fabrics do contain some synthetic fibers. All right, that should be all you need to sew your own pair of Honeycrisp mittens. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below or hop on over to the Honeycrisp Mitten section of the forums on disparateDisciplines.com. You can also reach me on Twitter at @ddisciplines, and the hashtag for the Honeycrisp Mittens is #HoneycrispMittens. So I hope you found this useful, and tomorrow we'll actually get on with some sewing. See you then!